Hey, it's Joey for Digital DJ Tips, and welcome to part 2 of how I DJ with stems. This tutorial series is all about DJing with what I call stem loops. Stem loops are short productions that you can quickly put together in Ableton Live using loops and samples. You then perform these stem loops while you DJ with Tractor Pro 2 using looping.
In part 1 of this video, I introduced you to the stem loop concept and gave you a rough overview of how I create and prepare a stem loop. I then gave a quick performance to show you the possibilities of DJing with stem loops. In this video, I'll walk you through creating your first stem loop map in Ableton Live. We'll start off by getting familiar with some basic dance music theory, which you'll need in order to create your stem loop. Next, I'll show you how to download and install a copy of Ableton Live if you still don't have it. Then we'll create a stem loop map in Ableton Live, which will serve as your blueprint for creating all your stem loops. If it's your first time using Ableton Live, don't worry because I'll also give a crash course on the interface to make it easy for you to follow along. Music is made up of notes. Those notes are put together to create melodies, chords, and rhythms. The instruments, like drums, pianos, and synthesizers, then play those notes, which determine what a song sounds like. In most dance music, such as house, we hear it as having a 4-to-the-floor beat. In rhythm music, all notes are organized in containers called measures. In styles like techno and EDM, each measure contains 4 beats, which gives it that tug, 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 tug rhythm. Those 4 beats are known as quarter notes, and we know this because the time signature of house music is 4/4. A time signature is composed of 2 numbers. The bottom number tells us what kind of note counts as 1 beat. In this case, it's quarter note, while the top number tells us the number of beats in 1 measure. In this case, 4 beats. In our house music example, 1 kick drum equals 1 quarter note, and 1 quarter note equals 1 beat. 4 beats equal 1 measure. That's what 4/4 means, and that's where 4 to the floor comes from. We'll use this basic knowledge of measures when we're making our stem loop map in Ableton Live, because each portion of our stem loop, such as the intro, verse, and drop, are made up of a specific number of measures. Using my stem loop map is the quickest way to create a stem loop because it acts as a guide. You place locators for parts of a song, like the intro, verse, breakdown, and drop. I call these parts chunks. The locators tell you where these chunks start and end, and how many measures they are. Once you've placed all the locators in Ableton Live, you can then begin to drag in the loops and samples into the audio tracks, which we'll be doing in part 3 of this tutorial series. For now, let's just focus on creating that stem loop map. The cool thing about this is that once you're done with it, you can use it for all the stem loops that you'll be making in the future. Let's get to it.
Alright, now it's time to get Ableton Live installed. If you already have a copy of Ableton Live installed on your computer, you can safely skip this portion by clicking this box, which will appear on your screen. If not, follow me and I'll get you set up with a 30-day free trial of Ableton.
Alright, now we're going to download Ableton Live to your computer and we're going to install it, whether you're on a Mac or a PC. So first, fire up your browser and point it to ableton.com, as I've done over here. And then just left click on this blue Try Live for Free icon. Go, and then you'll be able to select your operating system with this drop down menu. I'm using a Mac OS X 64-bit machine, so I'm going to left click on that. If you're using Windows, you can select it here under. So I'm going to choose Mac, and then I'm going to left click on download. Okay, so now that's done, I'm going to left click on the installer icon over here at the bottom of my browser. You may want to go to your downloads folder and double click on the installer. So here it is, and then just follow the prompts to install Ableton Live on your machine. My applications folder, and I am going to double click on Ableton Live 9 trial. And you should too. Alright, so when you start Ableton Live 9, you're going to get this screen. Just left click on start your free trial and follow the prompts in order to get it going. You'll be asked to create an account on the Ableton website, so just go ahead and do that. That's all there is to it. If this is your first time using Ableton Live, here's a crash course on the interface. Ableton Live is a unique digital audio workstation because it lets you work two ways. The first way is called Session View, which is what you see right now, and it consists of a grid of empty cells where you can drag sounds to it from the browser here on the left side, which you can open by clicking on this arrow. There we go, and we can drag sounds into it called clips. So let's try looking for something over here. How about this one? Let's drag it on over to an audio track. There we go. You can play these clips one by one by clicking on them, as I've done. You can even add like one beside it over here. Do that, and then if you want to stop them, just click on the stop button over here. You can also launch them at the same time by clicking on the arrow over here on the right side. Now you can have these clips looping indefinitely, meaning the clips will never stop playing until you tell them to. So let's just stop that for a while. So in Session View, time loops indefinitely, making it great for quickly sketching out ideas with music loops and samples. Session View is also used for performing with Ableton Live at a gig using a controller like the Novation Launchpad, which lets you trigger these clips. But we're not going to use Session View for creating our stem loop map. Instead, we'll be using Arrangement View, which is the second way that Ableton Live works. You can get to Arrangement View by clicking on this button over here. In Arrangement View, time moves from left to right, instead of in a looping manner like Session View. You can drag clips here and they'll appear as waveforms. So let's bring up our browser again. Let's try dragging that clip. Left click and putting it here. And also this one. And let's try playing it back. Just press this orange button over here and then stop playback, and then I'll press play. So as you notice, when the playhead, which is this long vertical bar over here, goes past the waveforms, you won't hear anything. Stop that. You can lengthen this by highlighting them and copying them like that, just as an example. There you go. So that's a quick peek at how Arrangement View works. So since time moves from left to right in Arrangement View, this lets us build our stem loop by dragging in loops and samples onto audio tracks, as I've just done, adding or removing audio tracks as needed for certain chunks, which will give our stem loop a sense of dynamics and progression. I'll explain this further in the next video when we begin to flesh out our stem loop map. Alright, so before we move forward, let's just do a quick run through of the functions we'll be using here at the top of the interface. You've got your BPM counter over here on the upper left, which tells Ableton Live the speed or tempo of your project. You can left click it and type in the tempo that you want, which we'll do in the next video. Now this is the metronome, which produces a steady click sound. Let's turn it on. And if I press play, and let's just mute this so you can hear it. That's what the metronome sounds like. Okay, I'm going to stop this first. And I'm going to turn it off by left-clicking it again. Now this is useful for ensuring that the loops you're placing are in time with the rest of your project. And we'll turn it on later when we add in our loops and samples in the next video. Now finally, you've got your transport buttons over here in the middle. This is play, this is stop, and this is record. Below that, you've got your clip overview, which lets you zoom in and out of the arrangement view timeline. So you can left click on it and drag down to zoom in, or drag up to zoom up. And you can even navigate around the timeline by left clicking and moving your mouse left or right, just like that. There you go. And then finally, just below the overview is the beat time ruler. And this is important in our stem loop map. The numbers here are measure numbers, which tells you which measure you're in as you move around arrangement view. Right now we're seeing 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And you can left click on the beat time ruler as well to navigate around the timeline. There you go. So you can see that there are some gaps in the numbers, but if we zoom in, we can see more measure numbers in detail. So let's do that right now. You can start to see there measure number 2, measure number 4, and so on. And if you zoom in even more, so this is measure number 1, and this is beat number 2 and measure number 1, beat number 3 and measure number 1, and beat number 4 and measure number 1. Again, there are 4 beats and 1 measure. So after the 4th beat, we move on to the next measure, which is measure number 2. And again, you see those beat numbers 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So let's just zoom out a little bit here, just enough that we can see the measure numbers themselves. So that's it for your intro to the Ableton Live interface, or at least the parts of the interface that we're going to be using. Next, we're going to start making your stem loop map. Using my stem loop map is the quickest way to create a stem loop because it acts as a guide. You place markers called locators for parts of a song like the intro, verse, breakdown, and drop. I call these parts chunks. The locators tell you where these chunks start and end, and how many measures they have. Once you've placed all the locators in Ableton Live, you can then begin to drag in the loops and samples onto the audio tracks, which we'll be doing in part 3 of this tutorial series. For now, let's just focus on creating that stem loop map. The cool thing about this is that once you're done with it, you can use it for all the stem loops that you'll be making now and in the future. Okay, so first off, here's what a stem map looks like with all the chunks filled in with loops and samples. Let's just zoom out a little bit. There we go. If we look at the bottom at the time ruler, you can see that this only runs around 2 minutes long. Pretty short for a track, and that's because you'll be making it longer by looping chunks of it when you DJ in Traktor Pro 2. On the right side, you can see I've got tracks labeled drums, percussion, effects, bass, and so on. I'll explain what those are in the next video, so don't mind them first. Let's focus on what's here in the middle of arrangement view. As you can see, I've got a little bit more space here now, and that's because I collapsed the browser by using this arrow. If you left click on it, it's going to appear and disappear. And also the bottom here by clicking this arrow on the lower right. If you left click on it, you're going to see this device view window here at the bottom, which we won't be using for now. So just left click on it to make it disappear. There are 5 main chunks or song parts in my stem loop concept: intro, verse, break, drop or chorus, and outro. There are also sub-chunks: verse 2, break 2, and drop or chorus 2. The subchunks are there to add a variation to the main chunk, such as an extra bass sound in the case of the verse 2 subchunk over here, or muting a vocal sample, as in the case of the drop chorus 2 subchunk over here. This is to keep your stem loop from sounding repetitive and stale, and I'll show you how to add these subchunk variations in the next video. For now, it's enough that you understand what they do. Now, as you can see, they're all the same length, and that's because each chunk lasts for just 8 measures, which makes it easy to remember while you're looping them in Traktor, because you can always just set a loop of 32 beats, which is the maximum loop length in Traktor. 32 beats is the same as 8 measures, remembering that 1 measure is equal to 4 beats. So 32 beats divided by 4 is equal to 8. I'm really bad at math, and that's one of the big reasons why I developed the stem loop concept to make things easier to remember. At the top of our beat time ruler, you can see that I've got locators here. Intro, verse, verse 2, break, break 2, drop or chorus 2, and outro. These are locators for the different chunks and sub-chunks in the stem loop. Let me explain what they are. Intro is the beginning of the song, which you normally use to mix a track in. It's usually the most basic drum beat or pattern in the entire stem loop. So I'm going to play back what I've got over here so you can listen to it. Yeah, so that was just basic drum beat along with a cymbal. Next is the verse chunk, and verse is where you begin to add other elements in the production, like a percussion sound for this instance. Let's play this back. Now you can hear some percussion going on thanks to this loop over here. Stop that, and again, 8 measures or 32 beats. So after the verse chunk is the verse 2 sub chunk, and this adds a bit of variation to the main verse chunk. Here we have a bass loop going on. Let's play this back so you can hear that. So it has all the elements of the verse chunk, but this time with the added bass loop thrown in. There you go. And then the next chunk is the break chunk. And this usually the breakdown of the stem loop where the drums drop out of the mix. And it's also usually the most quiet part of your stem loop. So here I've got a percussion loop going as well as some hi-hats. And it's got a bit of synth as well. Let's play this back. There you go. So this is the break chunk at the moment. After that is the break 2 sub chunk. Now this one adds a bit of variation to the break chunk, and as you can see, I removed a portion of the percussion and hi-hat clips here and added one extra clip towards the end, which is this one, which gives it that little bit of swooshing sound, that shh sound. So that's it for the break 2 sub chunk. After that, we've got the drop or chorus chunk, which is the main hook of the song, or the one with the most energy. Now usually this has the signature melody of the track, or in this case, it's got the vocal samples. So I've got that over here at the bottom. Let's just play this back so you can hear it. Yeah, it's got that techno vocal sample because, yes, the name of this song is Techno. Yeah. Okay, and then after the drop chorus chunk is the drop chorus 2 sub chunk, which brings a variation to the drop or chorus main chunk. Now here, I've removed the vocal sample just to give it a different flavor. So let's play that back. So again, same elements as the drop chorus chunk, but this time without the vocal. I've muted it, and I'll show you how to do this in the next video. Okay, now lastly, the outro chunk over here is the end of the song where you can mix out of a stem loop. It's a bit like the intro, but here I've added an extra percussion loop just to differentiate it from the intro chunk. That's it. So again, this is what a fully fleshed out stem loop map looks like. It looks a bit complicated, but let's try removing the clips. I'm going to highlight everything, like so. And then I'm going to delete it. And you're going to see that it looks a lot simpler. Again, these are just all 8 measure chunks, all the way through. Don't mind the tracks here on the right side first. I'll explain those later on when we start adding in loops and samples. So your stem loop map is going to look exactly like this. So let's go begin making it. Okay, so let's start making your stem loop map by adding in those locators. So first off, I'm going to give myself more space here. So let's collapse the browser. Go, and the device view window here at the bottom. And let's clean this up by removing these clips. You probably don't have these in your project yet because I just used these as an example. So I'm going to delete that. There you go. And we're going to want to make sure that our BPM is at 120 over here at the top. So if you are at 120 BPM, we're good to go. Let's add our first locator by bringing our mouse over here at the bottom of the beat time ruler, just where it turns to a speaker icon. So I'm going to right click it and choose add locator. Then I'm going to type intro, which is our intro chunk. Now, if you remember, the intro chunk lasts for 8 measures, so we're going to count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All 8 measures. These are 8 measures of our intro chunk. So over here on measure number 9, I'm going to right click and choose add locator, and then I'm going to type in verse because this is the start of the verse chunk. Now again, if you don't see the numbers here, if you're zoomed out too much and you only see these numbers 1 through 5, 7, 9 or even less, all you got to do is to left click and move your mouse down. So that's going to zoom it in. Again, you can move around your timeline by left clicking and moving your mouse left or right. Okay, so we've added the intro chunk as well as the verse chunk. Next, we're going to count 8 measures. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we are going to add the verse sub chunk. Verse 2. There you go. If you zoom out, you're going to notice that the shade of gray changes after every 4 measures. So this is a handy way for you to, visualize and see that you're placing locators in multiples of 4 measures. So just a handy little tip for you. After verse 2, we're going to count another 8 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we are going to add our break chunk. And move forward. And let's add break to sub chunk. There you go. Move another 8. And we're going to add the drop chorus chunk. And move another 8. Add the drop chorus 2 sub chunk. And then lastly, move another 8 and we're going to add the outro chunk. There you go. Now let's zoom out. Left click, drag your mouse up. So this is what your song map looks like. You've got 8 measures for the intro, 8 for the verse, 8 for the verse 2 sub chunk, 8 for the break, 8 for the break sub chunk, 8 for drop chorus, 8 for drop chorus sub chunk, as well as 8 for the outro. Now we can compare this with our project earlier, the fully formed stem loop map that I showed you. And it is the same. There. So that's it for making your stem loop map. In the next video, we're going to start fleshing out your stem loop map using loops and samples that I'll be providing you.
So that's it for video 2 of how I DJ with stems. Now that we've got your stem loop map created, we're going to flesh it out in the next video. I've got the full training article over at the Digital DJ Tips website. The link is in the description box below. Please hit the thumbs up icon and hit the subscribe button if you are not a subscriber yet. My name is Joey. Thank you again for watching this. I'll see you next time.